everyone hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to tell you, just looking at it all the faces, I'm so happy and so appreciative for each and every one of you being here today. I really do. I wanted to share with you today, the title of this was Just This Breath, because it's a talk about my practice as best I can in each and every moment. So last month, I had COVID, which doesn't sound like anything, but these days, what's not so potentially severe for most people, for my body, I'm in one of those high-risk groups. So I have a lot of pre-existing conditions, one of which has actually caused me to have 3 strokes in the past. And so even just being here in front of you to talk, I talk English and everything, but sometimes it gets a little bit challenging, shall we say. This also causes, these strokes come from a rare condition that I have. It's a heart and lung condition that really makes it difficult sometimes just to breathe, because the oxygen doesn't flow very well. It's not very efficient. How it flows through the body and the blood and all that stuff, I'll leave that for the doctors to describe. But because of that, I get a lot of lung infections. You can hear my voice now. Some of this is allergy, but some of this is also issues, shall we say, because of that syndrome. They call it a syndrome. And so, like I said, just breathing can be a challenge. And so when I got COVID, I said, oh, I wonder what this means for me. Am I going to go to the hospital again? I've been to the hospital so many times I can't even tell you. Have everything scoped. And in the past, something like that, I would have been like, uh-oh, what if, what if, what if? And I really suspect that, yes, I have pre-existing conditions. Everybody has their things. But I also think because of that mindset, I possibly made myself sicker. And so this time, this is what I'd like to talk about to you. I'd like to talk about what I did this time, what my practice was this time. So, a Dharma friend, when they found out that I had COVID, sent a text. And it was such an encouragement, because they, in their message, the first part was, this is an opportunity for practice. And just like the scripture that we read, every moment, every condition, every situation is a moment to practice. Me standing in front of you like this is my moment to practice. Even just walking off the stage, making sure that I'm being mindful, that is a moment to practice. So I saw the text and I said, okay, I'm sick, obviously. What do I practice when I'm sick? Especially, potentially something that might be a little grave. Well, the second part of the encouraging text was a reminder of the tools that we had learned. We have mind study class on Wednesdays, and we were reading at the time this book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Peace is Every Step. And in that book, the 2 tools that the Dharma friend reminded me of were the tools of deep, conscious or as we might also say, mindful breathing. And also developing the practice of smiling. What was interesting is that with those two tools, I actually discovered that my mind also received a change from that practice. So in that doing of practicing the deep breathing, deep conscious breathing, and smiling, sounds simple, I was also able to be in that present moment. Not that what if. And in my mind, was thinking less. I was like, oh, wow. So I guess my mind is what's creating all of this. So what was the process that I used? What worked for me? So, since coming to the temple, as we've heard today, as well as when we've sat and sitting in meditation, bringing and returning my attention to that lower belly. We've heard Dantian, we've heard Danzhen, whatever works for you, that lower belly area, about 3 inches below the navel. I've learned that that is such a wonderfully deep focus point. And that's where I practice my deep mindful breathing. And so imagine, if you will, I'm laying in bed and just had my hands on my lower belly, on that spot, just focusing over and over again, breathing deeply, while focusing on that lower belly. Sometimes my eyes were halfway closed, sometimes they were open. But with that focus, even when my mind and my body decided to depart, go away. So there was a lot of coughing. So I breathe in, get to that certain point, and it's like, hack. But then I realized the more I did it, the more I was able to just watch every time I coughed, my muscles moved. As I started noticing I could really watch everything that was going on. What was cool was that it was less scary because I was just watching. That's it. Not adding anything to that. Not like, oh my goodness, I'm coughing. Oh, what if? Just watching. Watched every move and I watched myself frown. I watched my brow furrow. What was interesting is after a while too, I was able to watch when everything calmed down. Can't tell you I was perfect, but again and again and again. And no matter how observant, or again, I found I wasn't that observant, I practiced not judging. Again, just return. Just the breath. And instead of judging, a smile. So I said I was watching myself frown. I was like, hey Des, how about the other way? So, smile. Sounds pretty simple, and it really is. Just returning. Smiling. And I realized also when I could sort of see my mind starting to go, guess what? Technical term. Or just buzz up. Kind of like there's that cotton up there, and it's kind of like, oh, okay. Just return. Smile. Some of the ways that I've been taught that sort of focus the mind, especially when the mind goes extra, technical term, or fuzzes up. So like in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, he suggests breathing in, I calm my body. Breathing out, I smile. I sometimes say to sort of recalibrate when it's kind of an extra day. It's just this breath. Sort of almost like a beaded necklace or beading something. Just this breath. Just this breath. Just this breath. Some folks say in and out. So just focusing that breath, focusing right there in that moment. For me, what worked during the illness was that just noticing when my mind was fuzzy, just noticing when the thinking was about to come up or coming up or came up, and just returning to the breath and to that lower belly. That's it. The reason I found for me that works is because sometimes the more words I put in my head, the more I get. So that's my practice, but again, everyone must find their practice. What was interesting was that focusing on the breathing, to be in the present moment, helped me think less in general, and it also helped me to think less specifically about being uncomfortable. Ooh, my chest is kind of like full and tight. My back is kind of full and tight. My muscles are kind of hurting from all this coughing. And I was able to identify less with these phenomena. What was interesting was also focusing on that deep breathing, being in that very moment with the breath, thinking less. It was very cool. I smiled naturally. I was like, oh, that's great, that's great. Which sounds like, oh yeah, okay, smile, smile, smile. Growing up, culturally, smiling was not a thing. If you look at family photos, if you look at me even in kindergarten, there's a picture of me like this. I'll show it to you sometime. It wasn't discouraged, but smiling wasn't encouraged. So even people on the street, I can recall even today, people on the street would even say, hey, smile. I'd go, why? I'm smiling inside. But then when I came to the temple, I have to tell you, more than a few ministers and more than a few Dharma friends also would say to me, hey, you should smile more. I was like, okay, this is becoming a thing. And what was interesting is when I finally took everyone's advice seriously, I really decided to lighten my spirit. That's what I noticed. Because I was also accepting something that everybody was telling me. I mean, sort of like, come on, Debs, come on, wake up, wake up. So I decided to begin to practice smiling. And you have to tell you, it really was unnatural, and it looked downright creepy. Really. For those of you who are old enough, Charlie Brown, kite-eating tree, okay? So I actually also turned it into a mindfulness item in my journal. So really just started journaling about it. It was pretty important because since so many Dharma friends and ministers were saying, hey, smile more, I was like, well, what's up with the smiling deal? And so in journaling, I also looked for the natural reminders around me. So, for example, in the meditation hall, when we're given the instruction, and notice your gentle smile. I'd smile, really, intentionally. I'd look back at others and I tried my best to smile back if they smiled at me. And even if other people were talking and they were smiling, I would smile too, even if they weren't looking at me. Because I was like, oh yeah, that's my opportunity. There, that's for you. It's reflecting right there. And then I started to apply that in other areas. When I started to feel that tingle of annoyance, that tingle of irritation. So like from driving, that person who was tailgating me in the back, that person who just cut me off, feel that little tingle come up? Smile. And over time, I was also able to actually apply it to situations. So like greeting, somebody come up and say, hi, how you doing? And I actually could smile intentionally without thinking about it. Interestingly, during this smiling practice, I also contemplated and reflected on my state of mind when smiling. I also looked at how it affected others when I did that. And so yeah, at first it was unnatural, so kind of, I didn't really see much. But after a while, again, over and over and over. And I had a few realizations. It was really fascinating. So when smiling, like with the irritation, or when I would look at someone and they'd say, hi, I noticed if I smiled, after a while I smiled, I was able to actually breathe in and out so naturally. And that was like a natural calming in the moment. Sometimes it was brief, especially initially, it was really, really brief, but it was there, and slowly but surely, it was calming, and my mind in that moment became much more aware of what was going on in the moment. I mean, I'm not talking, oh, but it's, again, over and over, just this breath. And what was interesting, it was almost like a natural pause. We're talked about pausing. It was just like that natural. And what was interesting was that the power, it actually had a power, that smiling. It had a power to transform. Well, maybe not when we think of transform, it's sort of a big word in English, which sort of almost transform. But even small transformations is transforming. So transforming the beings around me, the situations I'm in. My job takes me into a number of economically depressed neighborhoods. And gang activity, drug activity is pretty commonplace. And one time I was driving under the train, that's the elevated train. And when I was driving, of course, people cross the street, you know, wherever. And this young man who works on the street was crossing. I stop, give him enough room, and then he looks at me and I smile. That's it, smile. What was fascinating is that as he turned his head, I saw a faint crack of a smile from that young man. I saw him, his shoulders, at first when he was going, I can't imitate his walk because it was a very, very unique walk. It had this bravado to it, and sort of like, this is my street kind of thing. But he stood up a little straighter. He walked with that little less bravado, like that, I don't know, I can't imitate it, I'm sorry. But just in that moment, tiny transformation. Huh, interesting. And then there was the transformation of my mind and those around me. And that, just seeing that in myself and seeing even those small things in others, other beings, that practice of smiling for me turned into an act of faith in my Buddha nature. And the Buddha nature in all the beings around me. Thich Nhat Hanh, in his book, when we were reading it, he said, the source of a true smile is an awakened mind. I may not yet be an actualized Buddha, but I'm a Buddha in training. That's what I like to say. I have faith in my Buddha nature, the faith that I have a potential to actualize and realize Buddhahood. And especially when I make that vow, really, really deeply, really make that vow, and I truly believe it, like they say in the faith of Ilvacha, believing in all those aspects. Faith, and then practice, like we heard last week in our Dharma talk, the practice of Ilvacha. Really believing that through my practice, in every moment, whether I'm eating, whether I'm talking, standing, sitting, whatever it is, that faith in awakening to the truth of Ilvacha will give me that everlasting smile. And this practice has also, every time I smile, it also gives me the faith in the Buddha nature of all the beings around me. Not just human, my bird friends out the back, and several other beings. But faith in the Buddha nature of all beings is that, just like that young man who was crossing the street, who had the walk that was with bravado and sort of didn't really seem to want to show me his smile. When I smiled at him, the manifestation of his Buddha nature responded naturally, with a smile to my Buddha offering of a smile. So, in conclusion, just returning to our scripture, this is an opportunity to practice. This moment is an opportunity to practice deep, mindful breathing and smiling, which helps to stay more in this moment, to increase our awareness, and to cultivate that everlasting smile of the Buddha. And that reminded me of, there's a scripture in Master Sotaesan says that appreciating the happiness of heaven, that happens to be one of my favorites. So that happiness of heaven will definitely give me a smile. So I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate each and every one of you for just being.